Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, good morning, my friends. Starting to feel a tad bit like summer here in western Arizona. We've got kind of a shocking story for you today. Well, I don't know if that's accurate. More of an electrifying story. How's that sound? We'll be talking with Tasha O'Neill of the Historic Electric Vehicle Foundation. Should be kind of an interesting get-together. Cast aside all your preconceived notions, and let's take a look at the future and the past. Miss Tasha, how are you this beautiful morning?
Hello, good morning. I'm doing okay. I really like your intro song.
Yeah, that's from some friends of mine in Nashville. They have been together. Joe and Woody. It's the roadcrew66.com is their website. Joe and Woody have been playing together since the PX days in Saigon during the Vietnam War.
Oh
But they've
gosh.
been involved with Loretta Lynn, Crystal Gale. They played with a lot of different groups, and now they're kind of retired and doing their own thing. And they were gracious enough to do that for me. I was really appreciative.
Yeah, it's a good one. Well,
Thank you for getting up so early and for taking time from your schedule to do this.
my
Uh,
pleasure.
we do this a little early, even though the program is archived. The live program is archived on Spotify and other platforms. We do this a little early because it is live, and so we get a little interaction from sometimes folks even overseas, and it seems to kind of balance out the time a tad bit.
Makes some sense.
So, what is new with the Historic Electric Vehicle Foundation?
Okay, so do you want me to start with like a backstory of where the whole play started or where we're at currently and where we're planning to go?
You
Um,
you start where you're comfortable, and I'll jump in.
okay. So I guess let me give a backstory to how I got involved. The organization has been around for uh, over 10 years. We're currently in Arizona, but the nonprofit was formed in Washington State. But these gentlemen, and their vision led them to Kingman, as you know, because I think that you were the one of the first people they connected with in Kingman and helped them get their location where they're at the powerhouse. Um, and then so it's kind of evolved over the past decade. And about 2.5 years ago, they were working on an agreement, a partnership with the city of Kingman to expand from just having the cars on display to more of a learning center, a science center, if you will. Interactive, just a really, innovative, unique kind of facility. And the city bought a building, and so of course it goes through bureaucracy and councils and things. And so things we've had to work out some kinks and like just kind of go with the flow. So as of last week, the foundation, the HEVF, has been able to purchase the building from the city. So we have about 20,000 square feet that we are currently working with. We plan to, like I said, open a science center and use these cars as a medium to talk about energy, and because if we didn't have electricity and energy, we wouldn't even have the EVs. And to be real honest, like before being introduced to this organization and the history of all of this, I don't think I had like a true opinion about EVs. I'm just like, oh, it's another car. My husband does muscle cars and classic cars and that kind of stuff. And so I've always been a car gal, but never had much interaction or experience with this EV technology or had any knowledge of the history. And of course, I had to deep dive, so I knew what I was talking about. And I think it's so fascinating, and it's been around for so long, and really, I don't think that has many people don't understand that, that it goes back to 1840s, 1850s. I mean, it was brand new and it was a different type of technology at that time, but um, there's just a lot to it. And I was just telling somebody yesterday, if I could go back and pick to be anything, other than a country singer, I would be a historian. And so this position kind of allows me to dig into the history of things, and moving forward with the museum and the energy center, we plan to align the evolution of electricity and energy, starting with, kinetic energy and Galileo, up to today in nuclear energy, and kind of fitting the story of the cars and their makers and their drivers and their locations, kind of fitting that into the places, the timeline of how power kind of reached the planet.
It's the electric vehicle situation is just so fascinating because my pa always said better to fill the head with useless knowledge than no knowledge at all. The
There,
first person struck and killed by an automobile in the United States that I'm aware of is a fellow named Bliss, and he was struck and killed by an electric taxi cab in New York City in 1898.
wow.
And Ferdinand Porsche, he started out with electric vehicles,
His
and
very first car was an electric vehicle. I think it
yeah,
was like 1932.
we also had uh, gasoline electric hybrids being produced in 1915, 1916. So this is a story that has to be told, but this is really a perfect setting on Route 66 for this museum because Route 66 has always been in a state of evolution, and the electric vehicles are a state of evolution. It doesn't matter whether you like them or not.
Right.
It's just part of the evolving nature of transportation. What was originally, and I'm glad that you're carrying through with the education aspect. When Roderick and I first discussed this some years ago, the idea was to create a full display that chronicling the evolution of the electric vehicle, but it was also supposed to be an educational center and on green technologies, solar, wind, electric vehicles, all of it. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to see this coming to fruition.
I am too, and I would like to see really a bridge, just between, you know I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I can't help myself. But like when people think of EVs, a lot of times they want to politicize it. And it's not about that. The technology is what it is. Whether or not the government wanted to get involved and create their mandates or whatever they were trying to do, I'm not really up to current, I don't know much about that. But I know that when a lot of people, because um, they don't know how the energies partner together to create everything. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like we have, so it does create this partisan kind of thought process. Like, oh, those are for, the left people, those drive. No, it's not even about that. Let's kind of wipe that clean, eliminate
Yeah.
the political side of this energy. I mean, we all want energy independence. We all want uh, we want affordable energy. We want a lot of the same things in it. In this facility and this platform, I think, is going to provide this educational aspect that creates this nonpartisan truth, factual, just like we're going to put out the facts. This is what it is. This
Yeah.
is the type of energy. You can't really have um, uh, a car that is providing zero, carbon footprints or whatnot, and zero emissions, and call that clean energy completely, because where did that car come from and what is it plugging into?
Exactly.
So there's a partnership there. We can be the most efficient. We can work on sustainability. We can consume in a way that isn't just absorbing and not giving back. But I don't know, I want to teach people and explore and learn myself more and more about how the different energies and electricities kind of partner together to create what we're working with.
Well, people always are resistant to change, and I'm guilty. The older we get, the more rigid we have a tendency to become. But
For sure.
historic context is fascinating, and that's another aspect of the Historic Electric Vehicle Foundation. We have to realize that this is a little bit of irony for you, and I'll be brief. But in the mid 1890s, there were some reports done of about an environmental crisis, and it was called the manure crisis, because the horses on the streets of New York were producing something like 2 million pounds of manure a month, not to mention urine and dead horses on the street. So progressives, visionaries, started pushing the idea that the solution for the pollution was the automobile. And the automobile they were pushing was electric vehicles. So in the politicization of this, there was a lot of political pushback. A lot of it was lobbying from the railroad industry at the time, but there was a lot of political pushback against the early auto industry. That's just the nature of things. Politicians want to keep their job, and to do that, you cater to the people, and you unfortunately sometimes throttle progress, and that's just the nature of things. The challenge is to keep it from becoming too politicized and finding common ground where you can talk to people, educate people, and get excited about things.
I agree. And I like that you brought up the trains, because I don't, a lot of, let's go back to late 1800s, early 1900s, when the trains were solely coal and they were very unsafe. They couldn't travel very far. They polluted the air in these condensed, metropolitan areas, and George Westinghouse, he was kind of a forerunner of, let's say, OSHA, HR, kind of thing. He was like, let's make it safe. Let's make it efficient. And he invented, I'm sure he had some help, but he invented the electric system for the trains, which I don't know, that I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm not a mechanic, any of that, but he made it to where our trains could go further. They could haul heavier loads. They were safer for the workers. And a lot of people might not know that, let's say, the diesel engine powers the electric motor that creates the torque that is required to get those extremely heavy loads from a stop to a go. So that is an example of that, in a nutshell, very simply stated. An example of that partnership. And that came around 100 plus 120 years ago. And without that technology, we who knows how slow the industrial age, how differently that would have progressed, and so it's very cool.
Yeah, the infancy of the electric vehicle. The electric vehicle, to me, has always been practical for urban use. It's only recently the development of battery technologies and charging systems linked with solar that it has made it practical for long distance travel. And in the early years, the batteries, of course, the dry cells, things of that nature, were problematic. And people blame the oil companies. That's part of it, but that's a simple answer for a complex problem. As an example, Gallup, New Mexico, or Grants, New Mexico, I believe it was, they didn't even have electricity in the town until 1928. So why in God's name would you buy an electric car if you don't even have electricity at your house?
Exactly.
It took time. And now the battery technology and the charging technology is advancing with incredible speed. And that's transformative.
And it's going to continue to change. It's going to continue to evolve. It's going to continue to enhance. And like you said about the electricity not being in homes, how could you do it? And that's kind of what I was talking about with the evolution of electricity and how cars fit into that timeline. So it just explains it's not because they weren't the type of vehicle wasn't worthy of existing. It's because it wasn't able to exist. It was easier to haul fuel,
Mm-hmm.
or have a fossil fuel or gas cars than it was to um, wait for wires, electric wires. And back then, when you had the DC power, it was like you had to have a transformer station or every mile, so when AC power came along, of course, that there was some political battles and some innovative, you know, clashes. People didn't want to change that. There was a lot of money involved, so it took some time to for everybody to get on board and for that to expand. But it's there's just a lot to learn. And when I've been kind of looking into all of this because I have to be excited about it, and I kind of need to have an idea of what I'm talking about. And so I started
Sure.
looking into Nikola Tesla, because when did we start hearing about Nikola Tesla? I didn't learn about him in school. Um,
No.
I didn't learn about him until, the first car came out, and and then you thought Elon Musk was Tesla, and then it was a whole thing. And then, so of course I start looking into his history, and that's fascinating all in its own. In fact, we got to stay in his room at the New Yorker at
Oh
Christmas
my.
time. It was very that's a fun story. Actually, we had emailed the hotel for a couple weeks before going and didn't get a response. Of course, it's a busy place. And so we get there and we check in, and I thought, I'm just going to ask, and apparently they don't rent that room out very often. So he had a study and then his sleeping quarters. And so it was all connected in one, and they have since um, put it back into the two room. So it was very, very small, and they changed all of our stuff. He was like, yes, let's put you in there, blah, 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 gets us in the room. I mean, there was brown water coming out of the pipes for the first 24 hours because that's how infrequently they rent that room out. And my husband's like, oh, if you take a cold shower, it's clear. And I'm like, it's 30 degrees outside. I am not taking a cold shower. Nor was I going to complain about having, a water issue because they put us in his room, So finally, we did get some hot water. But in addition to allowing us to stay in his room, the head engineer of the whole facility toured us down the like 4 or 5 stories below the hotel. And that
Oh.
that was a funny thing. My husband was like, just go ask him. And of course I'm like, I'm gonna need a cocktail. I'm nervous, like you can't just go ask people to do this. And it was first thing in the morning, I'm over caffeinated, and I go and I'm like, hi, I'm so and so with, the HEVF, blah, blah, blah. And I was really hoping, I could, and I start talking, and this guy's like the concierge gentleman. He says, "Oh no, they don't do that. That's not going to happen." And I was like, "Well, let's say you did do that. Who might I talk to?" And he directs me over to security, and he's like, "Don't tell him I sent you over there." And I'm like, "Okay, fair enough." And so I go over there and I start talking to this gentleman, and he is probably, I don't know, older than me, mid 50s, late 50s, immigrant, but has lived in the city for 30 years. We start talking. He's like, oh, no, we don't do that. That's not going to happen. And I was like, okay, I just had to ask. And then we small talk for a little bit. And my husband has since ditched me. I'm all alone in this endeavor. And he says, the gentleman, the security guards, he's like, hold on just a second. Hold on, let me do something. So he goes, I'm just patiently waiting. I'm still thinking, oh, I'm not going to get a chance to do this. And he picks up the phone and calls the engineer and tells him, who I am, who I'm with. We're staying in Tessa's room, what I'm requesting. And he's like, he's going to be here, and he'll be right here to talk to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, like my blood pressure's rising. I'm super excited. And about 10 minutes later or so, the engineer shows up and he introduces himself and he says, well, when do you want to go? And I said, well, my schedule's open. I'm here. So when can you go? And he goes, how about right now? And I said, okay, let us go,
Whoa.
And so he starts to take us down. So at the New Yorker, they have a, sorry to sidebar on this, but I just thought this was such a fun story. They have a little bit of a museum set up with some artifacts left over from Nicola's room. And so that is the first floor under, in the first basement floor that's open to the public. And then the second basement floor, or it leads to this tunnel that is so beautiful and kind of captured history. It's just like stopped in time. It's mid-century. It's got the tiles and the emblems, and it's just beautiful. And he said that like one of the presidents, I don't know if it was, so that was like 1930, they would take him underneath the ground from 34th Street to Penn Station because he was in a wheelchair. And so they would wheel him underneath, so he would avoid the public. And it was just really neat. Then he takes us down another floor because the reason this was important to Tesla, because there's a lot of stories and myths per se about what he did living there, because he lived there the last 10 years of his life. And the New Yorker is known to have a generating station, like its own. The generator below that hotel could, at the time of its origination, have powered the entire city of New York. It just has enough to power its own thing. In 1969, there was a complete outage, and it was the only place that was lit up, that had power. So they said that he did a bunch of experimenting down there with AC power, and that he was like, he created an earthquake. Well, that was at another location. Anyway, so he takes us through these power stations and shows us the DC setup. They actually didn't even convert from DC to AC until OSHA made them do it sometime in the 60s. So it's all just, stories that people have made up about what he used to do there. And granted, they're great stories, and they make for, I've seen even videos of it, but he takes us down into all of these different, we had a coal generating, we had the DC, we had the AC, we had all of these different types of energy in this one facility on all of these different floors. And it was the coolest experience of our whole trip. And I got to see the Rockefeller Christmas tree. That's to tell you how cool this tour was. And long story short, there's more to it, but it's going to be on my podcast, so I'll have to save a little bit. And I come out from the tour, and the original guy, the concierge, he looks at me and he's like, he does like this mind-blowing hand gesture, like, are you kidding me right now? How did you get him to take you on this? And I was like, I don't know, I prayed. I got a little favor or something, I'm not really sure. And he said that for 3 years that this man has worked there, he said that people have asked and asked and asked to go on that kind of tour, and he's never seen them say yes to anybody. And so it was quite a fortunate opportunity that they took us on that tour, and I will be forever grateful. It was very, very cool. And so we sent them, I took back in May a bunch of gifts from Route 66 in Kingman and stuff, and gave it to the staff. So thank them for their time.
Very good.
It was very fun.
Yeah, there's so many. Tesla is one of those fellas that separating fact from fiction is almost an impossibility. Were you able to get pictures of anything down there? Did they allow that? And
I did. Yes.
Good. Will you be? Will any of this make it into exhibits for the new museum?
I think so. I hope so. And we are planning to do a little podcast of our own to kind of promote the center. And so this will probably be, and it'll be a visual. I don't know if that's still called a podcast. I'm still learning how to do all that, but it will be included in that. And then after learning more and more about Tesla, I started to learn about George Westinghouse, and I started to learn
Mm-hmm.
about Thomas Edison, and I learned just a lot more um, about the influence of the minds that were around in that time.
Well, the early auto industry, the 1880 to 1930 period, is extraordinarily fascinating because everybody and their brother was coming up with ideas. And the more I learn, the more I realize how little I know.
Right?
I just recently found that a Swiss inventor that was an immigrant to the United States, this would be 1910, 11, somewhere in there, he came up with the idea for a parking meter that was also a charging station. So you
Wow.
paid your money for the parking meter, and that allowed you to charge your electric vehicle. So there's so many aspects of this, and it really surprises me how many people that are obsessed with automobiles don't know the history of the electric vehicle and the people behind it. So this museum and this educational center fills in just a huge gap.
Right. And people talk about, let's talk about the batteries. I've seen so many documentaries and headlines, and it's so like dreary, the
Yes, yes,
the
yes.
blood batteries, the this, the whatever, and not to say whatever in a flippant way, but it's like, okay, fair enough, let's talk there. It's not always been safe, just like it wasn't safe to mine coal, or is it still safe to mine coal or to drill for oil? It is just, it's another, it's just another avenue of energy that does need to be regulated and made to
Hmm.
be safe, even in other countries that are where they're getting the cobalt or the lithium or whatnot. Um, and hopefully that people can step in, people that are purchasing from them won't purchase from people that are doing it the wrong way or unsafely. But everything started somewhere,
Right.
and and you don't know until you know how the process is going to go, or the safety protocols that need to be put in place. Same with, they say, how do you dispose of the battery? Well, you don't. You dissect it, and you dissect it and recycle it, and then pull out what's left of the power cell and reuse that in maybe taking it from a large battery cell for a vehicle to a smaller cell um, for a solar light, or a phone, or you can recycle it. And hopefully, I'm making a scenario up in that, because I, again, don't know the technology 100%, but we plan to hope to teach those kinds of trades, actually.
Well, these things are changing and evolving. Lithium batteries. From what I've been reading, lithium batteries won't be with us much longer because we're moving beyond that pretty rapidly.
Right.
And these technologies, there's always inherent risk. Steam cars were a very big thing, and as Jay Leno just proved a couple years ago, steam cars were extremely popular and they're extremely dangerous. He knows as much about steam cars as probably anybody alive, and he suffered severe burns with his steam car.
Oh, that is right. I remember you telling me that story
Yeah,
before.
we had a time in our early auto industry, Henry Ford, for example, when they started putting hydraulic brakes on cars. Henry Ford took out full page ads about how unsafe it was to have hydraulic brakes and how safe it was to have brakes on the front wheels.
Mhm.
Things change. Obviously, we've learned that brakes on the front wheel is a good idea. Uh, so, the same with electric vehicles. Things evolve, things change. We don't have to like it, but things evolve, things change, and we can find reasons to be excited about change.
Right. And they don't begin perfectly. You know,
No.
they evolve and they progress, and you learn, and you learn by failing and trying, and it's just what humans do. We are constantly looking for the next thing, to our brains need it.
I think it was Sweden. I was real surprised. I believe it was last year. It's the first year the sale of electric vehicles surpassed gasoline vehicles.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, it's really intriguing how this is evolving. The infrastructure has always been the problem,
Yeah.
that and technology, but that's evolving. And like I said, electric vehicles have always been practical for urban use, but it's only recently, the last 10 years, where it's become practical to take electric vehicles literally on a coast to coast drive or a Route 66 drive. It's now becoming practical, and as we develop the infrastructure, just as we did, this is another thing, Tasha. People talk all the time. I hear this. Well, you can't drive. The infrastructure is not there. It takes forever to charge, vehicles. All these different things. People forget that well up until like 1915, 1920, a lot of places there was trouble and it was hard to find the infrastructure to buy gasoline. Uh, it takes time for these things to develop.
Hmm.
When do you think the museum will be open? I know funding is still an issue, and it takes a lot of money to renovate some of these buildings
Yeah.
that you've acquired.
Well, and to build these exhibits, one of the it's like $500,000 just to build a quality large exhibit. And so we're hoping to have something open by the centennial of Route
Hmm.
66 for next year. And it's not going to be the full facility, um, but our anchor exhibit, we are hoping to have that in place. That's what we're working on first. This past week, we had a business reach out to us to kind of partner with us for the building that we just bought. Had no blueprints, had no real documents to it. Like it was an original, started as a grocery store in the 60s, and so the bones of it are great, and it could be this open space that we could work with. But then it was purchased by the state of Arizona and turned into an office space. So it's kind of like a rat maze of offices and walls and random spaces, and so it's like, oh gosh, do we go in and just gut it and start from scratch? Well, without having a construction background, I'm like, yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll just gut it, and we'll make a party out of it, and then we'll build something. Well, it's not as easy as it sounds, because those walls have power and water and all of the things. And so last week, we had what's called an as-built plan done, and so that will provide us with the layout of the interior of the building so that we can cost out how to move walls, which sections could be more affordable. We plan to add a mezzanine, like in a second floor, and so this will give us a good game plan to create interior floor plan layout of all of the exhibits. And then what we'll do with that is start presenting them to private and corporate sponsors, and different avenues to maybe get some funding per exhibit, per section, per portion of the building. So it's going to be fingers crossed, it goes smoothly and people are coming to us with their excited about it, because it is going to be a really cool opportunity, I think, for Kingman and the state of Arizona. And if you have you noticed how Arizona is like on the forefront of sustainability and different alternative energies, and they've been doing it since for a very long time. They've been leading the idea of having different areas of energy and alternative
Yeah.
fuels.
Well, and a lot of people, for people who are listening to this and shaking their head in a negative manner about electric vehicles and green energy, I'm going to be honest. I love automotive history. I'm fascinated by gadgets and technology. I personally am most comfortable in the world of Model A Fords. I like simplicity. I like being able to fill up my gas tank. I like
Yeah,
the old stuff. But, it doesn't matter what I like. The point of the story is things have to change and evolve. And going back to the manure crisis, Can you imagine today if we had
Mhm.
allowed the restrictions that were put on the auto industry and the attempts by different organizations to curtail use and development of automobiles and infrastructures? If we had 2 million pounds plus horse manure a month on the streets of New York in 1890s, what would we be facing today if we hadn't evolved and changed? It doesn't matter what things change. And what we have control over is the direction of that change. And part two to that is the rear view mirror makes a very poor planning tool.
Yes,
It,
yes.
it's
Hindsight.
yeah, it's so this museum is very, very exciting. I think once you started getting the press out, like a while back, I talked to you about the folks there in Bloomington Normal, have a whole collection, all the materials for the Henny kilowatt that they'll help and work with. And partnering with these organizations, getting the word out, it'll be interesting to see what materials, what cars, what turns up in the woodwork once you start shining the spotlight in those corners.
Right. And people call us all the time with these like random donations. And I'm like, what kind of car is that? What? Oh, that's a conversion. We just got this Triac car donated to us. And it's a manual electric vehicle, which I thought was not a thing, and again, I was enlightened and educated. But going back to Henry Ford and progress, a lot of people don't know that the electric vehicle was marketed and wit to women in the
Yes.
early 1900s because it allowed women to have independence and a little bit of freedom. Granted, they couldn't go very far or very fast, but they could go independently. They could start the car because it wasn't a crank. They had let's say their big dresses, and they're not standing on a dirt road or a mud puddle trying to crank a car. They just got in it and started it and drove. Same with fast forwarding, just to talk a little bit about you like gadgets. Well, the electric start for the gasoline engine, that is EV technology, electric vehicle,
Yes.
and then also to expand on EV, it's not just a car, there's all kinds of vehicles that we will display and talk about in the facility, and even to where our human bodies are electric vehicles,
No.
so we will explore kinetic energy also. um, and the possibilities are endless. It's very exciting to see what we can do with this.
Well, a couple points there to back this up again. More opportunities to fill your head with useless knowledge. The electric starter was conceived by Charles Kettering. He had come up with the small electric motor that made electric cash registers possible. And the reason he came up with the electric starter for the 1912 Cadillac is a friend of his, Byron Carter, who had developed the Carter car and some others. Uh, he was killed as a result of stopping to help a woman crank start a car there near Belle Isle in Detroit, and he had stopped to help crank the car. The car had backfired. The crank hit him in the face, and he
Oh
later died
gosh.
of his injuries. And as a result, Charles Kettering, Mr. Kettering, decided this is enough, and he put his thoughts together and came up with the electric starter, which came out first in the 1912 Cadillac. And speaking of electric cars and Henry Ford, obviously Henry Ford did not talk about this very much, but his wife, Clara Ford, she had a Detroit Electric that she
I
drove.
remember. Yes.
Because the Model T was a very simplistic vehicle, but it was still, it didn't have the ease of operation. And Jessica was just asking about Jay Leno. I don't know, but I do know that Jay Leno really is into electric vehicles. And I'll give you a couple things here, Tasha, that might follow up on. I haven't talked to Jay in a while, and I do apologize if it sounds like I'm a name dropper. But Jay has a Detroit Electric that he and his wife love to go out looking at Christmas tree lights in. And the last time I spoke to him, he had a kind of a mess of a Detroit Electric that he was making into kind of a modern resto mod. He was keeping the car pretty much original, but putting a modern electric drivetrain in.
Huh.
So he might be one to chase and see if there'd be interest in this. Also, the museum in Bloomington Normal that has all the Henny kilowatt materials, they might be interested in helping. And
We do
also,
have a Henny kilowatt.
yes, and those are very rare. And that museum in Bloomington Normal, they have all the factory materials, press photos, and everything on the Henny kilowatt. And I'm sure that you work with the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles as well.
We do. We have been very fortunate to have a relationship with them. They had actually our Henny kilowatt on display in their museum for a while. And then they returned it. And just a few months ago, they gifted us a 1994 electric car and a solar power car from, I think, the University of Michigan that had actually won some races and stuff. So yes, we do have a pretty neat working relationship with them. And
The Henny,
their facility is so cool too.
I was not. I knew the Henny kilowatt here in Kingman, but I knew very little about the car until I attended the Miles of Possibility conference a couple of years ago in Bloomington Normal, and the director of the museum research library there that had all the materials on the Henny kilowatt shared the history of the car, and I had to laugh because it was like the car had, even though it had been designed by engineers at General Electric and it used a 1959 or 60 Renault Dauphine body. It was almost like they had all these brilliant people behind the car, and it's almost like it was designed to give the electric car a black eye and to make sure the car never sold and was totally impractical. The price was off the chart. It had extreme limited range. It was almost comedic the way that car, but it's such a rare piece of the story. So that's an incredible thing to have in the collection.
And you never know what's going to come out of the woodworks. And that's part of the part of it that is so exciting too, because there's just so much to learn and so much to
Yeah.
be taught. And I do hope other people get excited about this. And where we live, it's pretty rural, and it's ranch land. It's not necessarily EV territory, but on Route 66, and there's so much history, and with the open road and the vehicles and all of I too think it is a great fit for um, for Kingman and for Route 66, and it's going to be very, very cool. It's going to blow all of our socks off.
Well, in 2014, when we first started talking about this, in fact, with Roderick and brought the embryonic collection here at the Powerhouse, we were the theme for that festival, and we were hoping we could brand Kingman as the crossroads of the past and the future. And so this really fits well with that concept, very well.
And 2.5 years ago, when we first started talking about this, I didn't foresee us being able to purchase the building. I
Yeah.
didn't know what that was going to look like, and here we are. Uh, in this position to even give back to Kingman in a certain aspect, because we have that other building, the Oddfellow building, which we're working on developing that little corner into a corner spot for the community. And so we really want to, the board I work for, they really care about the community, even though they don't all live there. They just think it's such a neat place and want to bring something worthwhile to the area, to the community internationally also. And yeah, there's a lot happening.
Well, here's a little thought that popped into my head. As most of you know, I have a little bit of a trouble keeping my imagination in check. But Mike and Jessica May, I tease them sometimes about being EV evangelists.
Oh, I love
And
them.
they have just, of course, they're associated with the Historic Electric Vehicle Foundation, but they just show up all over the United States driving. Well,
Yep.
they're Tesla, and the wouldn't it be neat if you had your first exhibit open next year, and we could put together. I know there's a drive electric, week, and that might be a time to tie this into that. But see if we can get people from all over the United States to either bring their vintage electrics or drive Route 66 to this, and see if we could get the largest collection of electric vehicles in one place.
Like
See
a
if we
car
can set
show.
a exactly a cruise and a car show. Get people to drive their electrics if possible. Of course, obviously, like a 1910 Baker electric, you're probably not going to want to drive it from
Right.
Chicago to Kingman. But to see how many electric cars we can get in Kingman and put the spotlight on this museum. Wouldn't that be a hoot next year?
That would be very cool, Jim. That is a really good idea. I love your imagination. What a great kickoff that would be. And for the centennial, that I'm going to bring that to the board and probably come back to you with that and see how we could bring that to life.
Well, see, National Drive Electric Week is what, September? I
Yep.
think. Well, God, that'd be a perfect time, and it'd give us a full year to promote this.
Yeah.
And
When
yeah, go ahead.
when is the aren't there quite a few things in the works for the centennial? Do you know when those dates fall in?
Yeah, there's stuff going on all
The whole
year
year?
next year.
Okay.
Yeah, all kinds of new stuff going on. But what we could do with this, I'm just trying to think. Uh, Whitney Ortiz, she was on the program a while back. She was the tourism director in Atlanta, Illinois, some a couple of years back, and she was kind of a visionary thinker. And Atlanta, Illinois, is one of those towns that's so small. First Street's the edge of town. I mean, I doubt if they have 1,000 people. And she put together an EV weekend there on Route 66 in Atlanta. And as I recall, she ended up with something like 200 cars. So
Wow.
what could we do with something like this?
Well, and maybe we can partner with someone like Whitney and see, how did you do it? Hey, would you like to put this on the road? Would you like to maybe we can work together with some of her contacts and some of those other I know there's a few car museums along Route 66. They're not solely EV, obviously, but they do house
Oh,
a couple EVs here and there. So we could probably connect
we
with that museum network.
Oh, here's an idea. Oh gosh, now you've done it. Uh, if we put together this EV cruise and coming to Kingman, not only do you have the Peterson, but the National Museum of Transportation is considered a Route 66 attraction. It's like 1 mile off Route 66. You've got a big museum in Chicago, and there's some car museums all along the way. We could possibly tie this in with these museums. This would be really really neat. Now your website is hevf.org.
Yes,
www.
sir. That is correct.
That's. Are you taking uh, do you able to take donations through that,
There
Tasha?
is a link there. Yes. It's a new website. We just actually launched it a couple months ago, and there is the ability to donate on there. Different levels of donorship or and then membership. We're working on that also. Um, I wonder. My brain's going too. Sorry. Fun Run, isn't that in September? No, no, no.
No, first weekend in
That's
May.
May. That's
Yeah.
May. That's right.
So to do this in September would be perfect because you're not competing with the fun run,
Right.
and Yeah, focusing on electric vehicles. I know Harley Davidson a few years ago. I don't know where they're at with it. They had the electric motorcycle,
Right.
and to introduce that, they did a whole tour of Route 66 with that electric motorcycle. And then you get into the electric bicycle. We can all the way across the board. Oh, by the way, here's another thought for you. I recently discovered a fella, I believe his name was Libby, in 1897 that came up with the electric assist bicycle. I thought I'd throw that out there. Uh yeah, this Tasha, this would be an incredible way to, because a lot of people have been focusing on the Route 66 centennial, and I worry that they're becoming myopic and they're not looking that this is the countdown to the highway's bicentennial. And what better way to showcase the future of Route 66 than with an electric vehicle get together?
I like it. I'm gonna run with it.
Tasha, I want to thank you for this morning, taking time to do this. I know it's a bit early, and not everybody starts the day at 4:30 like I do. So this is so this is almost lunchtime for me. But I really appreciate this, and I appreciate your dedication to this project, as well as Kent Baki and everybody else who has done their pinata impersonations and frustrated themselves and not given up on this project, because I think this is exciting. This is
Well,
really exciting.
I agree with you. And without Kent Baki, he's our president. He didn't really plan to become the president, but without him and his support and his long suffering with our this project, we wouldn't be here today. And of course we have our founders, Roderick and Larry Fisher, who's no longer with us, but um, we hope to help create their vision and yes, thank you for inviting us and having us on your show and being in support of the organization. I truly enjoy your insight and your imagination, and yeah, I look forward to what is in the future.
Well, all of these things, Route 66, this EV museum, building a sense of community in general, it is it's a team effort. This whole
Right.
thing is a team effort. Uh, Again, I really appreciate this, and we're gonna, what we're gonna do next week. We're gonna continue talking about cars, and I will bring up today's conversation with our guest next week is Richard Lintonello. And if you're really into the vintage car scene, Lintonello's name probably comes up. Over the years, since the 1980s, he has been uh, the chief editor in chief of more than 8 or 9 car magazines, including Hemmings Motor News, Hemmings Classic Car, Hemmings Special Interest. And he has just launched an incredible new magazine. Yes, magazines are still a thing. And he launched
Oh,
Crankshaft magazine. And he's also on the board of the directors for the Antique Automobile Club of America.
very cool.
So he'll be our guest next week, and
Okay.
we will pitch this museum, and we will talk electric vehicles, and we'll pick his brain a little bit, as well as talking about his magazine and other cars. And while I'm talking about the program in coming weeks, we've got Kathleen Hendrickson on July 13th. She's going to be our guest and give us uh, a tour, if you will, of Las Vegas, the original Las Vegas in New Mexico, which happens to be one of my favorite towns. Imagine a town of about 12,000 people that has nearly 2,000 buildings on the National Register of Historic Places. And
Wow.
the Santa Fe Trail is the main street. That's going to be fun. And
Yeah, for sure.
July 20th, again, we can tie it to this. We'll be talking with Elizabeth Olwig. She'll be giving us updates. She's for the Route 66 Association of Missouri. And we could be talking to her about the Museum of Transportation as well as all of the other things that are going on along Route 66 in Missouri as we get ready for the centennial. And July 27th, we come back to Kingman. We'll be talking to Jen downtown that's opened a neat little bicycle museum and bicycle rentals. So,
Yes.
so we're gonna have some fun. I got a question here for you that just popped up. How many cars does the Historic Electric Vehicle Foundation have in storage?
Um,
And I, go ahead.
I would say roughly 100 plus.
Okay.
We have quite a few.
The way this had been envisioned, what we had in Roderick, of course, what we had originally envisioned with this museum was there'd be a rotating exhibit at the Powerhouse Visitor Center, and somewhere downtown would be a dedicated museum, conference center, educational facility. And so it's kind of exciting to see this coming together. It really is exciting. And if you talk to Roderick anytime in the near future, I know that he also collects vintage bicycles.
He does, yes. I talked to
And
Jen about some of that too. Or they were,
that's where I was going. I was just
yeah,
gonna say that. Maybe we could see if Roderick wants to display some bicycles in Kingman as well.
that would just be even more exposure, and because it would be a neat idea. Yes, I don't know where
Yeah,
his bicycles are though. If they're in Washington or if they're with him in Croatia, I'm not even sure. He's hard to keep track of.
he is. Tasha, thank you so very, very much, and
Thank you, Jim.
I have enjoyed this. I'd like to see some of your pictures about your tours in the catacombs in New York.
I
Uh,
will
be,
send you some.
yes, because and I'll tell you, I'll put together. You send those along, and if you don't mind, I might share some. I'll do a blog post. I'll do a blog post on Jim Hinckley's America, jimhinckley'samerica.com, about the EV Museum, the HEVF, and a little bit of teasers about electric vehicles. I'll have that.
Okay.
I'll see if I can get that done in the next week or so for everybody.
Okay. Would you prefer I email them to you, or
Yeah,
how do you? Okay, I
yeah.
can do that.
If you can, email would be great. Hey, before we let Tasha get back to her real life, can anybody have any questions? Anything? Otherwise, well, we'll let everybody get to their breakfast or lunch if you happen to be like me, and we'll do this again next week. And Tasha, I'm just really excited about this. So thank you. I'm just most appreciative for everything you're doing here.
Well, likewise, Jim, and thank you again for having me.
You bet. Take care, young lady.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Oh, isn't that exciting? I mean, having like I say, I understand the politicization of these things, and I understand vehicles being these kind of technologies being contentious. A lot of it's misrepresentation, and it's also misunderstanding. Some of it's blatant propaganda. But once you start educating yourself and getting involved, your perspective changes, and that's what's important. And like I say, I'm fascinated by electric cars, all of these things. But personally, if I had a Model A Ford, I'd be happier than fleas on a puppy. That's just that's where I'm at. But don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of. Don't become too rigid, I guess is what I'm saying. So, my friends, next week, let's say we'll be talking to Richard Lintonello about the exciting new magazine, Crankshaft, and we will be talking about the Antique Automobile Club of America and things of that nature. Yes, happier than a clam at high tide. I like that one. We'll have to plagiarize that. But I usually don't get to nautical tidbits, if you will. I've been in the desert too long. I'm one of the dry roasted nuts that live here on purpose. My friends, thank you for joining us, and as always, I look forward to hearing your comments. I'll have this published later this afternoon with a link to the Historic Electric Vehicle Foundation. It'll be on Spotify and most podcast platforms. I'm having some trouble with Apple Podcast. I hope to get that resolved in the next few days. There is an embedded player for archive programs on theb.news, Jim Hinckley's America, and kingman.tours. If you're a website designer and you'd like an embedded player for your website, just contact me. I'll provide all the information, the code for you. Also, I have the website here. We have a dedicated website on Podbean for archived programs. And it's real simple. It's jimhinckley.podbean.com. And with that said, before I wrap this up, I got to give a shout out to some of the folks that make this possible. Number one is, of course, we've got some great supporters through Patreon. We appreciate everything you do there. And then we got some folks that are sponsors that can make your Route 66 adventure memorable for good reasons, not bad ones. That includes Connie Eccles at the Wagon Wheel Motel in Cuba, Missouri, the oldest continuously operated motel on Route 66. Angela Moreland, the Cactus Inn Motel in McLean, Texas. Great little 1950s gym. David Brenner at the Roadrunner Lodge Motel in Tucumcari. I just stayed there last week. God bless, that's a neat little place. Vicky Ashcraft of the Route 66 Association of Mexico. She owns the charming Enchanted Trails Trading Post and RV Park, top of 9 Mile Hill near Albuquerque. And this is a great blending, an authentic 1940s trading post, a full-service RV park, and a little bit of a museum with vintage travel trailers. And if you have trouble putting together a great road trip, not just on Route 66, but if you want to take an adventure trouble-free and have a good time in the United States or Canada, well, you can't go wrong with Route Trip USA. Stephen and his wife, man, they're great to work with, good people. It's an honor to be a consultant for them and have them a sponsor. Sam Murray down at Gilligan's Route 66, another great sponsor, does self-drive tours. He's got a great setup for Route 66 that is kind of like having a virtual tour guide in the car. And he also does a wonderful Mississippi River tour, and he does convoy tours, caravan tours as well. And that takes us finally to Austin Coop, 2 Lane America. It is a pleasure to work with Austin. He runs a tight ship, great ship. His clients are always happy. I can always tell a successful a fellow who's dedicated to providing his clients with good service, because by the time they get to Arizona, if they're ready to hang the tour guide, yeah. And when they get to Arizona and they're traveling with Austin, people are smiling, they're laughing, they're happy. And Austin does other tours like New England fall foliage tours. And he's got a tremendous tour that he does through southern Michigan, northern Indiana, Ohio, touring the automotive museums in the area. Those are some great sponsors. You can find more information about our sponsors and links to their website on jimhinckleysamerica.com. I look forward to hearing from you. We got a lot of exciting things coming down the pike. And check out our website. I've got a blog post up about, I'll be having some blog posts about our upcoming, our recent trip to AAA Route 66 Road Fest, and some new restaurants I discovered that have great pie and delicious food. Don't want to miss that. Well, I think that's enough of beating my gums this morning. My friends, again, thank you, and I hope you can join us next week. Please invite your friends. After all, this is a shared adventure, and be sure to share the program. Let's get the word out. Let's build this community. I got one more thing. Hey, when I got back from Tulsa, I realized we're getting close to 9,000 followers on the Jim Hinckley's America Facebook page. What do you say we try? It's short notice, but do you think by the 4th of July we can get that to 10,000 followers? Let's build us a community of road trip adventurers that like to share that adventure. Thank you, my friends. Vaya con Dios. Adios.
Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.